people who were involved in MLMs. What made you come out of the fog and what was your experience like? Friends of mine got into Amway. He did sales in his regular job, so there was a small chance they could do alright with it, but what finally ended it for them was that they kept buying stuff they didn't need to make their monthly targets, wound up with too much, and were growing broke, and topped it off by starting to hate each other and got a divorce. Mostly money related, but also maturity related. And they lived too close to their parents who were not a good influence on their marriage. After the divorce, Amway didn't matter, the $50,000 in credit card debt did. Sounds like my father. He died with something like $350,000 of unsecured debt after 15 years of get-rich MLMs, Shackley, vitamins, cleaners, and nicotine magnet therapy, and some ozone generators. BS success was always right around the corner. Next month, next year, it would happen. Always looked at the gross and never cost of goods sold. Got a few cars and trips, but he basically paid for them himself on credit to keep his level. All the meetings were cult-like with motivational posters everywhere. He also opened a few small businesses in his trade. They'd eventually fail because people would groom him with compliments and he'd do jobs for below cost to be a good guy. He'd be slightly ahead and then close the business and pour all the money on another MLM. It was horrible to watch and he died alone, a very unhappy man. MLMs were worse than the cancer that killed him. You know what? As much as I hate my anxiety issues, I kind of am glad for them at the same time. I seriously see people falling for those cons, and just think, you know what? That person seriously needs a little voice in their head picking apart every last thing that could go wrong. Yeah, fuck Amway. I had aunts and uncles get into it. My mom and stepdad were into it for far too long as well. I remember being in first grade and having to go with them to stand around the front of Walmart while they tried to recruit new people. Thank God I was too young to know how weird and sad this was. This was the late 90s, and I can't believe this bullshit still exists. My one aunt and uncle ended up declaring bankruptcy and lost their house. So, anyway, fuck Amway. One of my best friends is currently in Amway, and truly believes she'll be a multi-millionaire with a mansion in every major city across the world. She always talks to me about the things she'll have and do when she's at one of the upper levels of the company and super rich, but she's been doing it for years with no success. They have those crazy motivational speaker talks in concert halls, and everyone buys into the bullshit. They even convinced my friend and her boyfriend to secretly get married because it would be better for business or whatever. She won't listen to reason, and she always says stuff about how I'm not going to be a good mother or wife one day if I'm not rich enough to stay home with my family, and that'll only happen if I join Amway. Or she used to, anyway. We'd always get in fights about it, because I'd just try and say we can agree to disagree, but she twists it into me not believing her or trusting her. I hate Amway. Plus their products are terrible and grossly overpriced, but that's a given for that sort of thing. $50K credit card debt. Holy shit, I don't think I've ever topped $15K, and I feel like a failure just typing that LMAO. I joined Amway when Jay was young, but only did it because my dad and stepmom do it, have been for 25 plus years, and I actually liked a few of the products and wanted to buy them myself. I never intended to make money doing it. Their cleaning products and vitamins are the shit. Only reason I know is because it became a legal matter in the divorce. His parents bailed them out, then sued the couple to get it on record. He got his shit together after the divorce, wound up paying out his parents in about 2 years. Turns out his parents were still toxic, but that's a different story. Meh, I didn't rest it like an MLM. I never tried to sell to anyone, I joined to get a discount on products I liked. Ended up saving me a few dozen bucks a year, and my dad wasn't pricey to my purchases like he was before. I was anti-MLM before LuLaRoe and I'm more anti-MLM after. And I think it's important to share because the culture of shame for getting involved in the first place, or for not being one of the 1% who succeed in the long run, keeps people making the same mistakes, like maybe this company will be different. I felt like it was different. I still look back in the beginning and think it was different. I sold a massive amount of clothing, sometimes thousands of dollars a night. Let me promise you, it always ends the same. I've left a very difficult to leave religion. When I started to hear the same platitudes from LuLaRoe, the same excuses, the same betrayals and gaslighting, I wanted to leave, but I struggled. Then the owners kept doing crazier and crazier shit and the saturation of sellers was sucking all the enjoyment out of it. I had customers for year plus who would regularly spend $100 or more a month who suddenly were able to buy the same shirt from someone quitting at our cost. As someone who feels great shame about nearly everything, I've had to forgive myself because I was one of the lucky few who got out alive. I sent all my remaining inventory back and got a $10,000 refund. But if I'd properly kept track of my P&L, not even considering the hours of time spent away from my family, well, it's tough to swallow. Thankfully, I don't think I ever aggressively recruited. I wasn't aggressively recruited. That comforts me. Sorry this is long. It's adapted from something I wrote earlier this year. I'm so glad you tapped upon this, the culture of shame. I think that sums up why so many people stay. Because if you would just try a little harder, work a little longer, pay a bit more money, ask even more friends for favors, maybe you'd get that big break. And if you quit, that just meant you were a flake who gave up too easily. You just have to have more faith. Looking back on it, I think it's such an American thing, pulling yourself up by your own bootstraps. If you would just work a little harder, you wouldn't be so poor. But God forbid anyone point out it was a failing business model. It's also why people keep falling into them, because people who have learned from experience are ashamed. I can't tell you how many times I've read people quitting who say, I still love, insert MLM here, but I just don't have the time to dedicate to it. It's easier to say they failed than to admit the really embarrassing thing they got scammed. No one wants to say they were duped. They don't even want to say to anti-Mlm'S. They just want to disappear and pretend it didn't happen and then someone else unwittingly falls into it and maybe, just maybe, they could have been saved if more previous sellers were honest. Honestly, the culture of shame seems to me to be part of the reason some political groups stay tightly put together too. Neo-Nazism, for instance, and racism generally. Their whole thing is us versus them, and then you get a bunch of people who shame them, just putting themselves in the them camp, when they should be trying to make an overall us camp. I was also in LuLaRoe. It was different, in the beginning. When retailers quit, you could sell your inventory back to the company at 90%, meaning we didn't have to compete with retailers going out of business. Releases were limited for everyone, even the mentors and top 100, so everyone could get a piece of the pie. Then corporate changed the game to appease the big dogs. I went 15 releases without getting a single item, and watched every single mentor and top 100 get anything they want, all while saying they were in the same queue as the rest of us. Note, I'm a math teacher with a knowledge of basic statistics. Them all getting 15/15ths while the rest of us got 1 to 5 was not luck, but a statistical fix. The first month I merely broke even, I resigned. I'm definitely one of the lucky ones. I made a lot of money and didn't go into any debt. Outside of month 1, I ran in the black for 2+ years. It was so much fun. When the game was changed, and the owners got super greedy, it was time to go. I never had a team, and never tried to recruit a single person. I only made money off of the clothes. It was fun. It's hard to explain it if you weren't part of that initial wave, but there was something to having parties, having women feel pretty, genuine fun. It just eventually shifted to more of the pyramid model, with a super dark, super gross side. Glad you got out without damage. The second the pyramid model took effect, the fun was gone. Many of my LLR friends made good money without a team. It genuinely was geared towards selling a product, and empowering women. Then the owners got a taste of the high life and needed bigger profit margins. There went the buyback and the deep discounting from goobers started. Then the mentors and top 100 felt they deserved early access, and bigger orders. There went the little guys even having product to sell. Then it crumbled and became an MLM. The only ones making any money were the ones that built huge teams. The little guys were set up to fail because so many were still under the illusion that the game was like it was. It absolutely broke my heart when my friends couldn't even order the good product, then corporate would give their customers a retailer map to find another retailer. The owners have done some really shady shit. I wouldn't be sad to see them in federal prison. My wife's best friend sells LLR, and now my wife is going to sell it too. I have always been very anti-MLM. But we are financially comfortable, I'm a lawyer, and my wife wants to contribute more, so rather than keep fighting with her about it and how her friend is profitable, I let her invest to learn the hard way. Young and stuck in a job I didn't like. Saw it sales job and being naive I thought well it can't be worse than what I'm doing now. Did it for a few months before I was broke. Realized in the middle one day after being ignored for the 60th time that I could make more money and not be ignored all day by working any other job. Applied to a call center, blagged my way into the ambulance service and now I'm a paramedic earning way more money than I ever have. I remember when I was 18 years old, I went for a job interview at Cutco. The way they called me over the telephone, I thought it was a real job. I was so tired of my PT job and I felt I was going nowhere. So when I got this job interview, and I got the job, I was so excited. I had a full-time job. I was going to make money. But the honeymoon didn't last until the next day, as I found out what the company actually was, and it wasn't a real job. Thing is, I'd be way happier as a dishwasher at a restaurant because at least it's honest work for a real paycheck. Saddest thing is, I was an 18-year-old out of high school. The other girl interviewing with me was in her 20s, and had a BA from a good university. That was my first hint that post-secondary education wasn't the infallible roadmap to success I was taught it was by my family. When I was in college I was looking for a job and my mom's friend said she would pass along info for a potential job. A few days later I got woken up by a phone call saying I had been referred for a job and they would like to give me an interview. I took down the information thinking it was the referral from my mom's friend and went to the interview. I didn't catch all of the details because I was still kind of groggy but went anyway. Turns out the interview was for Cutco Knives and there were some friends from my church working there that had given them my contact info. I sat through the presentation and offered the job but turned it down because it seemed sketchy. When I got home after the interview there was another friend from church at my house selling Cutco knives to my parents.